Hello, everyone out there in the world today. I am recording this reading into the record on January 30th, 2025. And I can't believe it's 2025, first of all. Um, I am going to I'm doing these in smaller videos. I'm trying to get a couple recorded today, maybe put them up, on different scheduled days on my YouTube channel, Erica Swenson Elliott. Right now, I'm working on the theme and details to include in two upcoming books. And I have a couple different lines of books. One I'm featuring right here is a spiritual fiction series. It's called the Calendar Novel series. This is my grandmother, Marianne Pascoe, on the left of my screen. She was born in 1913, and she was the one of the first record keepers of women in my family, and clearly I am keeping up the carrying the torch and the family tradition onward here. She I- I'm I'm developing some of the themes about the connection between Cornwall in southwest corner of England, its ancient history, the Quakers that were in England in that area in particular that came and um, first developed the area of Philadelphia and Southeast Pennsylvania, and how that kind of has come full circle in the fact that Nana's family were immigrants from Cornwall, her father's family, Pasco. And then I actually grew up in Bensalem, Center City, right near where Ben Franklin is. It's just a little pop up again. There's the art museum. I grew up a few blocks away from here in the Fairmount section. And if you look down this 360, now you can look back into Center City, Philadelphia today. Then let's see if you can see there's City Hall. That's William Penn, the founder of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It's still not a state, technically, it's the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And that building was, his monument was put on top of there much later. But I'm going to get into how he got the land grant from Pennsylvania and today in this little episode. So we're going backwards in time to his father, because the more I looked at things, you end up going back further and further. So I want to just give a little bit more. Here is today all of the city of Philadelphia, quite large. Center City that we just looked at right there. This is the Delaware River. Up here is the township of Bensalem, from Trevose, kind of down here just to the side of Bristol. That is connected to the Quakers from Cornwall. So when this little corner was given to 12 Cornishmen by William Penn, I'm going to just say Jr., who was the one that was given the land grant because of his father. So one other spot where they first came, William Penn came with, I believe, 23 ships. They landed down here at Chester, which is where my grandparents lived and my father was born. I went to high school there. So that was a very ancient area. That was the first port. It was not up here. And this is 1650s to 80s in that time frame. You can see how close it is to Wilmington, Delaware. So now I'm going to come back here. So I'm going to go back to William Penn, the Admiral William Penn, and this is kind of the Wikipedia version is quite tame, whitewashed, vanilla version of how the English historical perspective would be viewing him. So when you get kind of down into the deeds and the weeds and details, there's a lot more to this man's story. So I'm just going to use this so you can kind of get a glimpse of the time, the time frame. So this is the father. He's an admiral for the Royal Navy. He's working for the king, and he's here at this pivotal time when Cromwell um, leads the rebellion against the crown, runs the King Charles off over to France, and it's called the interregum or interregum time. So they're in between the monarchy. So there's technically no monarchy. And each side is going to view what you do as a treasonous bastard if you don't do what they want you to do. So he was actually flying and serving in the Navy under both flags. That's why he has different flags here with his allegiances. So he figured out how to kind of thread the needle. My opinion about him after all the reading that I've done, and I'll have to get into more book sources in a later episode, is he was really a loyalist to the crown. And even so, he sacrificed a lot, kept himself alive. And then I think he was basically the secret backdoor channel talking with the exiled king, King Charles, and keeping their hopes alive. So Wikipedia does not say this, but if you started reading into more of the direct source records, you get into more of the whys. So as a child in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, growing up in the city of Willie Penn, under the hat of Willie Penn there on that big pedestal in City Hall, we were taught that the King of England owed some debt to William Penn's father, the admiral. We didn't even know he was an admiral. We just knew it was the dad. And instead of paying him back in cash, he's like, "Oh, you can have some land over there in the faraway colonies instead." And that was all we heard. But when you get into it, what happened was Admiral William Penn was a very wealthy man. He had estates in Ireland, as well as in England. And he pledged his entire fortune, or a substantial part of his fortune, cashed it out, and gave it to the crown to restore the royalty to England. So, in theory, and it basically the records I was reading was it was just him. There wasn't other people doing this. And he had the Navy too, right? So he had the control of the seas. So without him, in theory today, there would not have been a continuance of the crown because he's the one that got him back. So if you read like this watered down version, we're like, oh yeah, he was the one that got put the king on the boat and kind of brought him over in pomp and circumstances. But I don't think that's a full account of what actually happened based on other sources. So, okay, you pledged your whole fortune, you cashed it out, you got your king back on the throne, and what does he do? He's like, oh, sorry, I don't have any money to pay you back. Thanks for getting me back to my rightful place. I'm gonna just give you some land over there. Now the guy's like sick. He only lives to age 49 anyway. He had a rough life. I think he spent that 1 year on the Irish Sea, never got off of his vessel, trying to weave through the period of Cromwell chopping off the heads of all the royals that were not loyal to him. So it's like the same old stuff we hear in history. Um, he never gets to see Pennsylvania, the land grant, with his own eyes. I find it interesting it's still called the Commonwealth. That's like definitely like a royal type term versus a democratic term. And it's very specific about the size of Pennsylvania, that it was equal to the land grant of Pennsylvania was equal to the size of the British Isles. So it was like a steganography, a secret symbol, basically saying, I know you gave me my kingdom back. I will give you your own kingdom equal in size. So I found that interesting too. Um, Okay, so now the son, William Penn, quote, Jr., he was what we call today like the limousine liberal. You have the wealthy family that made all the money. They're conservative, they're the loyalists to the crown. And so now you're like the rebel with looking for a cause. So he joined up with the Quakers, which like often happens, like they were doing everything anti government, right? They were like the activists of their time. They were doing insane things like, there is no royal crown, there is no blue bloods. They started the practice of shaking hands with everyone, which, before no one touched the royals. So it was breaking down class lines. They wore simple dress, the black, that's the black hats. So you can see like it made his dad nuts. So his dad, the admiral, shipped him over to the Irish estate. He was like, oh, go live over, like if he lives over there, maybe he'll like snap out of this Quakerism cult. And that didn't happen. He just hooked up with more of the Quaker in Ireland, and he kind of started a whole following over there. And when he went, so now that the admiral is not given this cash by the king, and the king is like, here, take the land instead. He sends his son, and his son is the one that goes over and lands with the 23 ships. And this was he took a whole bunch of Quakers with him, including these Bensalem Quakers. So there's manifests that people have spent years diagnosing or reconciling the names on the manifest of the 23 ships. I haven't done that yet for the 12 from Bensalem, the Quakers from Cornwall, but they might have come in a later wave because it was more than one, group of ships coming over. But the crown was really happy to get rid of the Quakers because it was definitely um, people that were criticizing their power and their, high and mighty blue blood status above the regular rabble. So they were like, sure, go on over. So there was good things that happened with the Quakers, and they, of course, were still imperfect human beings, but they did some great organizational things. So if you look at Philadelphia, we come back here again. One of the things they did was, and it could have been laid on top of a more ancient, organizational structure, but you can see it's very grid-like, uh, very not hodgepodge, crooked streets. Years later, Charles Dickens is quoted in his travel diaries, which I have back here as well, saying it was too organized and he was just like so homesick for London. He was looking for a crooked street and couldn't find one anywhere. So it's definitely like laid out on a grid. Um, and Penn had a lot to do with that, more, the modern application. Who knows what was underneath? Maybe there's something even deeper. But if we come to Bensalem, I'm going to read you. Let's see if I can find the books. I think they were here in the store. Okay. So I have these three books. Here's one of them. The first one, Traveling Through Bensalem. And there's a definite tie-in to 12 men and their families, their wives and families, that got the land grants from um, William Penn Jr. in this area in Bensalem. And there continues to be a history forward for the next 100 years. Ben Franklin ends up being very tied and connected in with one of the descendants of these Quaker families. So that's like going to be an interesting, future episode as well. What I can tell, the main father-son team that got the largest land grant was this Lawrence and Joseph Groudon, Growden, that came from the Cornwall area. They, similar to the Penn father-son team, it's only Joseph that comes. The father is too elderly and doesn't leave Cornwall. But there must have been, they're also pewterers, so they're more like merchants. It doesn't seem like they were the miners so much. So it's interesting, like this group of men were maybe like the ones maybe more with the sailing vessels and like getting the import-export businesses going. So the pewter was made from the tin that came from the Cornwall mines. I'm gonna come back here to Cornwall, England. So there's like some very similar names that came into the area. They brought a lot of the same names. There's a Trevose here, Trevose Head, Bodmin, Penryn, that came from here that are in the Bensalem area and the greater Philadelphia area too. One of the funny stories I touched on earlier was, they're all Quakers and supposedly like they're, you know, setting aside the physical things in search of a more spiritual path. But like they're still human. So Joseph Groudon, even though he had the most land, he still wanted more of the land. So he ends up fighting with his adjacent neighbor, John Tatham, who was one of the original 12. And he was actually, it seems like he was a secret Catholic. So he was pretending to be a Quaker so he could get the land granted by William Penn as well. And he also had an alias of John Gray. So Joseph Groudon really hated his neighbor instead of loving his neighbor next door, like the good book tells us to do. So they were found fighting with each other in the meeting houses, and the Quakers kept great records. So a lot of this detail comes out of the Quaker meeting house records of the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area. So I guess but they had enough money they couldn't get thrown out because they were like controlling the meeting houses. But other people putting the records in like this is the most like base behavior I've seen yet in the meeting house. So I guess eventually John Gray gets outed as being Roman Catholic and not a Quaker. So he ends up going over and having land on the New Jersey side across the rivers like Burlington and Beverly. But I think he still maintained his land. So there was still a lot of fighting going on there. Um, I think the other thing I just wanted to show you in this segment was I'm tying this in. So if you're interested in more of this history, it's going into two different series of my books. This historical books, Pursuing Pete, A Hidden Hero's Journey to World War II Front Lines is coming out soon. It should have been out already, but I'm trying to get a little bit more of this detail in here. Pete is here, obviously in the circle. He is my grandmother's brother-in-law, and he was in World War II. He was killed right as the beginning of the Battle of the Bulge started. So he was training in England, not that far away from Cornwall, while Nana's writing these letters back and forth with him. Show you where he was. So if we come up here, Stonehenge, Southampton's right here. They were training in Tidworth. Here's ancient Bath, those that we talked about in the last episode. So he's right in this area in Tidworth, and then they come down and load onto their landing ship transport to go over to D-Day. And they leave from right behind the Isle of Wight, and then they come across the English Channel down here to Omaha Beach. And that is Hell on Wheels. Pete was in the reconnaissance company. We know a lot about him and been able to reconstruct because of one of his friends. And that is John Evans right here. Um, I've connected, and this is only through God bringing things together, but I finally found John Evans' book, his memoir when he returned. And through his book, which is up here on the shelf, Odyssey of an Iron Knight, I've connected with John's family, Don Evans' family, his son John, and who has been really gracious and sharing a lot of the documents that his father here had collected once he returned and survived from World War II. They served side by side. He was actually with Pete. Evans was with Pete, my Uncle Pete, when he was killed. So it's very touching to read that description, eyewitness account. Um, when it's when he was a shell came in, all the metal broke apart, and a piece of it lodged in the back of Pete's head. And according to Evans, it was the size of the flashlight. And he says, I was the last one to speak to Pete, and there were other people around that survived. So I'm kind of dissecting that because people that have witnessed like gunshot wounds to the head, people can still be talking for some time because the soul is a powerful thing. I'm going to get in some of the things I'm going to do in future episodes is about spiritual beings and when we're leaving and that mysterious exiting, how it's not just a physical body, what people have seen and experienced. And in this case, I think there was something more there that Pete was still talking to Evans because he did not die of his wounds until he was at the hospital. So he didn't die on the battlefield. He wasn't killed in action. He died of wounds, DOW. So that's interesting, like spiritual realm to me. This little map, I just want to explain if you sign up for this book, you're actually looking at a page from the upcoming book. These are military maps that I found in my virtual journey. This is from the D-Day when they're actually coming over they call these overlays. They're not technically maps. So like they were trying to give information for that came from the detailed military planning map that the commander had. But like if they got caught, and they didn't want to have all the special, codes of exactly where they were, but like here's the general layout. So that was called a map overlay. Um, so I found these really kind of beautiful and like sad at the same time to see what they were doing. So I just want to promote this book a little bit. If I do a lot of shorts on my YouTube channel about Pete and about Evans, and kind of building up and keeping their memories alive. So this book's going to be over 200 pages. There's going to be tech. I have the text, and my publisher and I are working together to like basically put the text explaining what you're looking at on each of the pages. So we have about 200 pages of photos, and then the text will make it, I don't know, 300 pages or something when it's all done. But this detail I'm sharing, getting on the record today, is like building up more of my context of where we came from and where are we going, and keeping their stories on the record. So the other series I just want to come back to, the April novel in this spiritual fiction one is going to have there's a lot of Dublin, Ireland already in there. So I'm going to weave a little bit more of this William Penn stuff that I'm sharing with you in the Quaker connection. I have Bath, England, and I want to like build out a little bit more of the Cornwall in the next book. So you can get up to speed now. And if you're interested, you can just try one book, paperback and Kindle. The trilogy is the only one I have in hardcover, so that's like a nice gift one. Regarding geographies, the January novel moves around a bit from Wilmington, Delaware. Um, it bounces around the globe. February novel has Wilmington, Delaware, West Palm Beach, Florida, New York City. March novel has a lot of Columbia, South Carolina, and then this one goes into Dublin as well. So there's like a little bit of jumping around and tying souls traveling through time and coming back to different locations and helping each other. So, what if we discover every action taken creates an invisible imprint on eternity, a tapestry of woven stories from one soul group working through time and space. As they journey towards their own growth, they unlock mysteries, expose dark secrets, and heal old wounds. So, looking forward to getting the next one on the record with you. Hope you're having a great day. Namaste.